Welcome everyone to Adobe Max 2021. I'm ZEISS Ambassador Kenneth Hines Jr. Now I'm very eager to get today's session going because there's just so much material that I have that I want to uncover for all of you. And then also I'm just super excited that I have the opportunity to actually share with you how I go about the various color adjustments that I use for my images in Adobe Lightroom. Now we're going to jump into Adobe Lightroom in a second, but I want to run down the list of subjects that I'll be going through in this particular session. And they are visualizing the final images. So this particular section, some people may determine, I'm a little crazy. I don't know. Haven't decided if that's a good thing or not. But I'm going to go through a series of photos, and I'm going to share with you what took place while I was taking the photo, what are elements that I liked about it, what my focus may have been, or what I felt about the image to where it decided what my color adjustments were going to be for that particular image. Secondly, we'll look at profiles and presets. Next, masking adjustments. I'll utilize the various brush and gradient tools here. Next, we'll look at color grading. Now, this is one of my favorite features in Lightroom since it was introduced last year, and I just can't wait to go through this section with you. And then finally, HSL. We'll look at the hue, saturation, and luminance panel within Adobe Lightroom. For this session, it will be taught entirely in the cloud-based version of Lightroom, but you are able to utilize all the tools shown in this presentation in the classic version of Lightroom as well as Adobe Camera Raw. Now you might notice a few slight differences in where certain things may be positioned, but the functionality for them will be the same. So with that said, let's get right into Adobe Lightroom. So now that we're in Lightroom, let's go through and uncover some of the so-called secrets, I would say, about my images. Well, they're not really secrets. And I'll just talk with you about what are some of the things that I looked at in these specific series of images and how did they direct me to what my color adjustments were in Lightroom. So if we look at our first image here, this is a nice autumn image. Now, I really like having those rich orange, yellow, reds in my photos for autumn images. So at the time that I went to this location in West Virginia, the colors weren't ideal, but you can't always plan around getting the perfect shot. I know that's the case, especially when it comes to landscapes. So for this photo, I really love the composition, and I knew immediately what I wanted the colors to be. I wanted something that, like, visually, I saw something rich with these very nice saturated colors, but I didn't really have this in the original image. This is the best that I could do. So I'm bringing this into Lightroom. I said, oh, we're going to take out anything that does not have to do with red, orange, yellow. Those are my primary colors that I wanted to focus on. So, like you see the green here that's over in the leaves? Yeah, we want to get rid of that. I want to make that a little bit more yellow, have a little bit more of that autumn element in there. And then if I zoom in, you see where the waterfall has like this blue tint. I don't like having blue tint on my waterfall images. I always eliminate this. So you get that cast coming off of the sky. And so fortunately, in this instance, I have the sky region here is a little blown out. So there's nothing there. So with this particular image, I could just go into the blue channel and desaturate my blue level. Simple, easy way to get that nice white look on your waterfall photos. So that's where my direction went. You know, I saw this composition, and how it came about was, this is a very popular location in West Virginia that people go and photograph. And everyone was shooting a grist mill that was in the background there. You can vaguely see it. If I zoom in there, you'll see it a little bit there. And so a lot of people were going to get that shot, and all of these photographers were lined up. Well, I had the idea, oh, let me walk back and see if I can find something else. Because there's this waterfall that no one ever photographs, or at least I've never seen anyone do so. So I walked back a little bit, and I was walking by this little path, and I decided to go down the path. And I just happened to, I didn't even set my camera up yet. I said, oh my gosh, this is the perfect shot. I was by myself. No one else was out there. When I saw this, I immediately knew how I wanted this image to look. I knew the colors. I just knew right then and there, this is how this has to look. So for me, it's all about being there visually, you know, being there visually, being there in person and visually seeing my photos edited while I'm shooting. So for me, it's about connecting with my art and feeling the scene that I'm in. That's how I determine, you know, what my actual composition is going to look like in its final stage once I've gone through post-processing. And then secondly, editing for me is about adding my signature creative style. It's never about fixing an image. Because if there's a photo where I feel, oh, I don't really care for this, I don't really like it, and then I decide to keep it, and then I bring it into post-processing and I'm like, let me see if I can do something with it. I'm not gonna like it the same way. It's like I have to see it right then and there. Otherwise, I don't take the shot to begin with, because if I don't feel anything, then I don't feel like it's worth keeping at that point. I really have to connect with my images if I'm going to retain them and then bring them into post-processing and edit the photos. That's just how I work. So, you know, for me, editing is about the creativity, never to fix. So then now, if we go to our next photo, we have this beautiful portrait of this model, and immediately, warm colors. You know, she's our focus. I mean, it's very easy to just look at your images and know kind of like, where does your own attention go to when you view your own photos? That's why it is so important to have a connection with your art. Your art is simply an extension of yourself. It's a way that you express yourself. So if you have a disconnect between yourself and your art, then it's going to be a totally different scenario for you. And you might struggle a bit. You know, if it comes down to you having to edit anything, it's going to be difficult because you just don't have that connection. You really have to feel what you're doing. Art is an emotion, it's an expression. So you have to feel that. So for this photo, you know, it's all about her. Everything else in this frame, it's basically an accessory. And in the background, you see we have a little blue, we have a little green, we got a little aqua going on. Do I want to retain that, or do I want to mute it a little bit? Because she's our focus. She is our focus. And so, you know, I just want to keep those earth tones. One thing to note is that when it comes to images that I have with people, I try not to go too over the top. I don't try to do anything that will harm the texture or the color of someone's skin. That's very important. So I will go a little bit more extensive on something that's a street image or a landscape photo. But anything with a person in it, I don't go too far because I don't want to change any of the characteristics of that person in the image to where, you know, she might be this color tone now, but then I do something that drastically changes her and may make her really, really light or really, really dark. I don't want to do that. So I'm very careful with my color adjustments when it comes to people images. So then if we look at our next photo here, now you all know I'm a fan of the subway. Love my subway shots. It's kind of self-explanatory of what I'm gonna do here, where my focus is. Look at that red, look at that yellow. That's what we're gonna focus on that. But let's look a little deeper in the photo. Yes, that's the obvious, but let's zoom in here. Look at the train. Look at the train. You notice there's a blue tint there. You might not think to focus on that, but that's an important element, at least to me. I can either choose to not have that, or I can work around it. So when I look at my photos, I'm looking at smaller details, things that are less obvious. And in this case, some people might not care about the train. They just see those other colors, and that's what they're focused on. But for me, I'm looking at things that might not be so noticeable right then and there, but I can use it later on when I'm doing my color adjustments. So remember that, because we're going to come back to this image, and I'm going to show you what I mean. So then on this image, we're now on the train car. And of course, Again, just like the last image, it's immediate. You're going to focus on the warm tones. Look deeper than that. What else is in this image that could potentially stand out, but it's not as obvious? Just notice the handlebars. Notice the lighting. What's the color cast that's coming off of that? More of the blues, more of your aqua. You can play with that. Yes, you might have an edit that's just the warm tones, but expand your creativity. Look beyond that. I will take that lighting and I sometimes will get in my mind, oh, let me focus on this one thing because it's not as obvious, but I feel like I can make something from that. And so I'm going to keep that in mind. So also remember that too. So then next, here we have another fall image. Self-explanatory. You got your green, you got your orange, you got your yellow, got your reds. That's pretty much what we got going on here. Now, a lot of people ask, what's your secret to getting your images as vibrant and rich as they are? There really is no secret. There is no secret. I would say if I had to pick one thing that, you know, if there's a key element about my photos to give a response to that question, it's simply how I balance my rich colors with contrast. That is all that it is. How I have my contrast levels just makes those colors look more vibrant, especially, you know, with the lenses that I use with the ZEISS lenses. They capture those finer details. And so with the way that I edit my photos, it just brings that out even further. So once I bring it into post, I do my edits, it just has this very unique look to it to where, you know, people recognize my images, you know, immediately when they see them because it's just a matter of how my contrast level is in relationship with the colors in the image. That's how I view my images. I think that's what people see in my images, and I think that's how their eyes are just drawn to that specific nature of my images, where people say it's like a 3D look, a wet look, a glass look. You know, I've had people say it, or it even looks like a painting. I get that often about my images. But that's what I feel like it is, of what people are noticing. So in this final image here, you got a lot going on. We got a ton of colors going on with this Chicago image. So what do you do in a situation like this where you might have multiple ideas? Keep them, because you can create multiple things with the same image. 1 minute, you might be looking at this photo when you first take it and have an edit in mind. But then as you go throughout your journey in photography, you might create new skills where you'll come back to something that you've taken and have a brand new edit. Well, if that happens, what do? You don't want to ruin your original edit. Well, that's the beauty of Lightroom. So let me show you how you do that. So let's come over to this image that we've already edited of the Chicago photo. And I decided, let's keep the color. You know, we had a lot of colors going on. You had your aqua, you had your green, but then we had an abundance of the street lights as well as the building lights with the yellow, the orange, and the red. So we can choose to keep this as vibrant as we did by retaining those colors and editing around that. But then let's say I also wanted to just focus on the buildings, because look at the light that's coming from them, the yellow, the orange, and the red. I like that for some reason. I just really, really like that. And I want to do another edit that just focuses on those colors. Well, you can create multiple versions in Lightroom. So if we come over into our edit panel, you'll see at the very bottom, you'll see this option that says versions, and we're going to select versions. Now, if you're someone utilizing Adobe Lightroom Classic, then you won't see versions. But what you'll be able to do in the Classic version is create a virtual copy. This is essentially the same thing of how versions work, where you're able to create multiple copies and have different edits for the same image. That does not interfere with the original raw file, and you're able to make multiple adjustments while retaining your original edit from the start. So in this case, we have our colored version, but then, like I said, I wanted to do one that focuses more on just the building's interior lights and the street lights. So I created this metallic version. So see how drastic of a difference that is, where we sort of muted everything and just have our lights. Not beautiful. So, say I wanted to do a few adjustments to this, I maybe wanted to brighten up the lights a little bit more. Let's increase our whites. Let's increase our highlights a little bit. And let's maybe give it a little bit more black. Let's make it a little bit more moody. We'll bring that down and maybe add a little contrast. So now that I've done that, we could save it as another version. So let's go to create a version, and I'll type in, let's do metallic version, and we already have a 2, so let's do a third one. And now we have metallic version 3. So we can either bounce back between the original one or even our original color version. You can create as many of these as you want. And, as you build your skills in post-processing, come up with new techniques, you can come back to your old photos and apply new edits without interfering with your original edits. So just a great way to take advantage of some of the tools here in Lightroom. So the next thing we'll look at is profiles and presets, something I absolutely love quite a bit with Lightroom. Now, what are the differences between a profile and a preset? Well, a preset is basically your recall action. You can recall your adjustments that you've done on an image before that you may have saved, or it could be a preset that's pre-installed within the Adobe Lightroom app. Whereas a profile basically is like if you've ever been on Instagram and before you upload, it gives you an assortment of different filters you can apply onto your photo. It kind of functions that same way. You're basically adding an edit on top of all of the adjustments that you've done. So it's not interfering in any way with those adjustments. It's just basically adding a second layer on top of it with those different profile options. And so I'll go through and show you just how all of this works and how you can create your own in the preset world and apply these profiles and presets to your own images. Now, one thing I'll also note before we start is, with our presets, when you're doing a preset, if we click on our edit panel, you'll see this option for presets. And once we select presets, we'll have this menu that pops out, and you'll see 3 tabs at the top. You'll see recommended, premium, and yours. Well, what's the difference between these? Recommended is what you'll actually get from Lightroom running its AI on your image and giving you preset options from the Lightroom community on what it thinks would be great options in presets for your specific photo that you can choose from. And they're free to utilize. The premium are presets that have been pre-installed into Lightroom that you can select from for different things. In this case, you see their portraits, you have auto options, they have them listed under style for more cinematic or vintage options. And then you have those that are focused with subject, those for food, landscape, travel, etc. So you can use any of these pre-installed presets that Lightroom has for your images as well. And then thirdly, you have yours, which is self-explanatory. They're yours. They're your presets that you've created. So as you go about making adjustments, you can save your own adjustments and come back to them later for a different photo. It speeds up your workflow to where you don't have to go through everything individually. You can recall a preset, apply it on that image, and then of course, just make tweaks here and there to fit that specific photo. That's where they come in handy. They really save you time. So if you don't use the presets, try them out. They help a lot. So for this photo here, we have our image back underground in New York. And so remember I was talking about that warmness of the photo? Well, we're going to have that, but then don't forget, I also mentioned that blue tint on the train. So let's see how that works out. So for this, I want to use my 40-second underground. And we're going to use the warm. So here, you see, we focus strictly on those yellows and those reds, and it has a very warm feel. And so I had a preset already made of this edit, come to the image, and I can select it. And then once I've selected it, if I need to tweak it a bit, I can do that. Let's say I want to add a little bit more in the shadows. I can bring that up a bit. you know, so that way it fits that specific photo. So you're not going down individually changing everything. You don't have to do that. That's the beauty of a preset. Now let's change it a little bit. Let's bring in another edit that has maybe a little bit more contrast, but then we take advantage of that blue that was on the subway car. So here's a cooler tone one. Look at the difference. See how we took advantage of that. I made it cooler, kept the blue, added a little bit more contrast, and so we kind of blended the two. We still have a little bit of the warmness, but it's got a cooler element to it, which was a little bit different than the previous edit that we had here. So see, there's many ways to where if you have multiple ideas, you can apply them to your image. And you know, you can save them as, have different versions of an image. And then as you go along creating new edits, save them as a preset. So that way you can come back to them and maybe revamp them a little bit. I do that often. All of the presets that I utilize, I use them regularly, and I'm continuously remastering. That's how I get better at my images. So let's take a look at some more. So here's a waterfall, another waterfall image. And for this, we're going to come over to my preset and we're going to select my waterfall warm. Well, we'll stay with this since we already done it. So again, remember I don't like that blue tint on the water. Well, we got that out and we sort of made it look a little bit more like it's closer to end of summer, early fall type photo. Got rid of that cool effect. But let's say I did want to keep that element and just have the waterfall where it's still white, taking away that blue tint. Well, let's go to waterfall cool and see what a drastic difference that is. I made the green a little bit more saturated, and then we sort of muted those earth tones to where it's a very, very cool image, very different from before. So there's our warm, and then that's the cool. Very, very different. So then let's go to this subway photo. So remember, said the obvious was keeping it as a warm photo. So let's go to, we want our train car warm. Let's do the warm tint. So see, of course, you kind of saw the direction with that one. But then let me show you what my green tint preset is. Aha! See how we took advantage of that cooler side? It still worked. It still worked. Look at how beautiful that is. I really like that one. So I keep both versions of my images. Like I sometimes create new things, and if I have an edit that works, multiple edits that work on an image, I save them all because it works. See how we took that smidge of coolness of the image and we use it to our advantage for the entire photo. Might not have thought that before, did you? Didn't think so. Because I mean, look at that, very different. Look at how warm that is and look at how cool that is. Neat, isn't it? Okay, so moving on. So let's see what happens when we do a combination. Let's use a preset and then let's bring in profiles. So we're going to go back to our preset and let's use my Fulton Center 1. But now we want to use a profile. So where it says Adobe Standard, there's a toggle to the right where you can browse all profiles. And so let's use a modern one. Let's go down here. I like this modern 10. So once you select your profile, you can actually adjust the intensity of that profile on your image. So you can either have where if you go to 0, it's not applying anything, or if you go all the way to the extreme to 200, it's at its harshest. And so you're really going to see a big difference there. So we maybe want to dial this down to about maybe 75. And that looks pretty good. See how we just changed how that image looks by just adding a profile on top of the preset. So one thing to note about profiles is that you also have an option here that says camera matching. Now what this is that it's bringing in the color profiles that you have with your respective brand of camera. So in this case, I have a Sony. So I have the creative style options of what I have in my Sony. I have clear, deep, landscape, so forth. If you're using a Fuji, you'll see all of those different creative profiles that you have on your brand in Lightroom. So the camera matching profiles that you would see in camera, you'll see them here in Lightroom. So if we go back, let's go to a portrait where we've already used a preset, but I still don't like where it is. So let's go and add a profile here. So let's see what works for this. I think I like the Modern 7. I think we like Modern 7 and maybe take out a little bit on the amount there. That looks pretty good. That looks good. Now, as we're doing this, say that you've added a profile and you really like it on top of that preset, and you might want to use that later on for another image as well. Well, here's the thing, you can save all of this. So once I've applied this profile, let's select our preset, and you'll see this plus sign where you can create a preset. And when that displays, you'll see all the options that you can select to save in a preset. You can save everything. You can save your masking, you can save your effects, you can save the profiles, everything. And you can group them into any category that you want. So in this case, I have my Adobe Max 2021. And I have, so if you have something more selective that you may want it to save exposure, but say you don't want it to save your highlight adjustment, you can deselect that, or you can keep it enabled, just your choice. You have the option based on whatever you want to save in a preset. So since we created this with a profile, we do want our profile selected. So let's save this. We're going to do warm portrait, and let's do 3. And then I'll do with profile mod 7, since that's the profile that we utilize. And then we'll just save it. And so now when I want to recall that, all I have to do is just hover or select that in my profile or my preset category, and there we go. You know, that's selected right now because that's the last edit we just did. Or let's say I want to use something else. Let's say I want to use warm, this one with the profile Art 8, the Artistic 8 profile. See how different that is? Look at that. So now we have where we can easily recall those. Very, very useful to utilize. So let's skip down and now let's look at some of our brush and gradients within masking. Now for this year, masking is changing a little bit. Now I'm not going to deep dive into masking because we're just going to focus on it for our color adjustments. But there is so many new additions with masking. I hope that you all try them out and see what's new. Learn about these new features as you go throughout the conference because they're very, very neat, I must say. But for today, we're just only going to focus on them for our color adjustments. So let's go in here to one of my cityscape images of Manhattan. And I want to just focus on my sky area here. So for this, I want to use my linear gradient. Now this is the gradient that I use for any of my landscape, cityscape photos. And that's where you generally will use that type of gradient. Now, there might be some opportunities where you can use this for other things and it will work pretty well. But especially for images like this, I really love using my linear gradient. So we'll go over to our new masking section where we'll click on masking and we'll create a new mask. We'll select linear gradient. And then anywhere in this region, I want to pull down from the middle. I'll pull down about there. And it's okay if I get the buildings. I'm not concerned about that at all. So with the linear, because I pulled from the bottom, so anything at the top is going to be where we're going to have the harshest transition. As we go down, those adjustments start to fade. So, and you can adjust that to how you choose for your specific photo. If you want to make it a little bit more narrow as far as how harsh the gradual effect is, or if you want to widen it, you can do that. It's up to you. So we'll bring this to about there. And so what I want to do is maybe we can let's move the masking tool out the way so that way you can see. Let's maybe, do we want to add a little red? Or do we want to add a little more orange or yellow? Just depends. So let's see, I want to make it a little bit more orangey. And then let's also adjust our white balance. Let's make it a little bit more warm and then add some saturation. And then boom, there you go. That's using linear gradient. How cool is that? Very cool. So if you've never used that, try it, try it. So now let's look at this image where we have the lady with her hat on. And I'm like, I'm not feeling the red. I want to change her color. Let's make it purple. We'll make it purple here. So for this one, we'll go back to masking. And this time I want to use a radial gradient. I use this one often for most of the photos that I edit. I love the radial gradient. So what this does is that it creates a circle around the area that I want to work within. And you can change the size based on how you choose, and you can kind of move it around. So I'm going to start in the middle of her hat. We're going to click and just drag it out. Drag it out till we have her hat highlighted. And then we can reposition this as needed. You know, pull this up a little bit. There we go. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now, the one thing I love using the radial gradient for is because it's not as precise as using the brush. But what I love about it is that it's just something that I can pick up very quickly to do my adjustments. I don't really mind too much about having any kind of overlap with any of the alterations that I may be doing within a specific area within the radial gradient. So I can actually adjust where the feather is. And so what that is if you look at this circle, look at the inner and outer ring. So where the separation is with those different rings is where your effect gradually changes as far as where it's not being applied versus where it is. So let me demonstrate that. Where the feather is, if I bring this to 30, let's say 40, everything in this outer ring is going to be gradual. As far as from this ring on out, the effect is going to start becoming more gradual. Or I can have it more harsh by making that circle a lot smaller. So it's just up to you as far as what area you're working within and how you want that effect to be applied. So for this, we want to change her hat and we want it to go purple. So let's change this more to purple. And so you see how that works? So now watch what happens with the feather. If I adjust it now, you see how now you see more of that red because we've now widened that feather area. So it's going to have a less or a more harsh, what am I trying to say here? It's going to have where, because we've now widened that space between the inner and outer circle, our effect is going to start gradually fading as we get to that outer circle. But if I bring it back, watch what happens. See how now it's including the whole hat because we've narrowed that area. And I specifically wanted every area with her hat to be edited. So we have a little area here that's kind of getting on that flag, but it's not too much. Like if we bring the feather in a little bit, see how we just took that off the flag? Very simple, very easy. So just a very easy tool to utilize. And see, we changed her hat to purple. Nothing to it. So for this photo, we're going to use our brush. So let me zoom in here. And we're going to use the brush. And we want to make this large. And let's have a wider feather. And for this, I'm going to use auto mask. Now, what the auto mask does is it will recognize where there's a difference among the edges. So with this flower, it will notice the edges here where I'm at the end of that flower, and it won't have my brush highlighting the area that's behind that. In this case, those leaves that are in the background, because we don't want to adjust that. So I want to turn on my auto mask. Without having auto mask, it will highlight any area that I'm hovering over, whether I want it or not. So for this, we'll enable auto mask. And then I'm just going to highlight the area that I want. Now I have my overlay on blue so that way you can see where my edit or the area that I'm selecting is being selected from. Okay, that looks pretty good. Let's come in there. And then we'll make it a little bit smaller. and come in here. There we go. Look at that. We're just a highlighting. We're just a painting. Paint away, paint away. And there we go. That looks pretty good. That looks good. So once we've done that, now let's change this. Let's maybe make it a little bit more orange. Let's change our hue, make it a little more orange. And see how simple that was? See how simple that was? Nothing to it. Now, the one thing with the brush is very precise. If you want to make any kind of precise selections on an image, use the brush. It's similar to, like, I guess you could say using the radial filter, but you're actually able to, you know, we actually were able to focus on just the flower itself. We weren't overlapping any area. So that's where the brush comes in handy. So definitely try that. It's a very useful tool. So then the last tool that we're going to look at is our color range mask. And so what this one does is that it isolates a specific color tone, and that will be the color tone that you're editing within. So if we go back to masking, we're going to create a new mask, select color range, and I'm going to select the umbrella. So in this image, that's the only color that we have. So it works here. There may be times where you'll have a specific color in numerous places in an image. And so using the color range mask might not always work. You might not be selecting the areas that you might want to work within. So, you know, just depends. But for this image, it will work because it's the only color that we have in our photo. So let's select our umbrella here. And I may want to use the green. Let's change this to green. And that looks good. That looks good, doesn't it? I really like how that works. So very simple, very easy. You know, if we turn that off, boom, we're back to the original color. Add it on. There we go. And so that's how I like using these masking tools within Lightroom. Very useful, very easy. So next thing we're going to look at is with our color grading. Now this has been my favorite tool within Lightroom since it was introduced last year. So with our color grading, it replaced split toning, which if I know there are a lot of people that I've taught over the years that had never even used split toning, and now it's color grading and they still have not used color grading, but it's such a powerful tool that it has now expanded what you could do with split toning. It added in where you now have midtones, you have a global adjustment, and then you can adjust the luminance. A lot more flexibility to what you can do for a photo. So let's look at an image and go through our color grading. So for this image, again, we're back with this image and, you know, we have that sort of black and white image, but we still have the color of the lights. Well, let's say we want to do something with that black area, the black and white area of our image. Let's add a little bit of color to it, even though, you know, we're not focused on it too much, but let's just add a little bit to it. So I'm going to adjust my shadows and my highlights here. So we'll just add in the hue, and I want like a green tint, and then I'll add in some saturation. And then for my highlights, I will add in a little bit of warmth, and then we'll add in saturation. Now, one thing to note, color grading did replace split toning, but split toning still lives within the color grading. Now, if you want it to function the same way that your split toning did, you'll see this blending option. All you have to do is switch blending from its default and bring it over to 100. Now it will function the same way that split toning did. So split toning is still there in spirit, but it's just now called color grading. So where you would use the blending is that this is where you have either a harsher look in where the shadows, highlights, and your midtones separate, or if you want it to be more gradual, that's where you would have the blending. And then you also have this balance option, and this is where it shifts the color tone emphasis to either the dark or lighter parts of the image. So for this image, I want it to have that split toning feel. So we have it on 100, and then we just gave it some color into those shadow areas. And then we added a little bit into our highlights of warming that up a bit too with the lights. But see what a different feel that was without color grading? That's what we had. With color grading, looks beautiful, looks beautiful. So then let's come to, let's see, I want to jump around. Let's go to this image. So this one we have, it's a little bit cool, on the cool side. But for this pine cone image, I really want it to have a more warm look to it. So again, let's go back to our color grading here. And we want to focus in on our shadows and our highlights. So let's add some warmth. Let's go about 40 or so. And then on these color wheels, you can even drag the wheel to wherever you want to. So as you come more inward to the middle, your saturation's decreased. As you go to the outer part of the ring, you're adding more saturation. So it's another easy way of adjusting. You don't have to always use the little levels down here if you don't want to. So we'll just add a little bit in our shadows. And then for our highlights, we'll come in to our highlights, go into the warm color spectrum there with our hue, and we're going to add a lot of saturation because this is going to be our sky area. So we definitely want that to be warmer. And so for here, I want to adjust my balance, and we'll bring down the balance a bit. Okay. And then next, let's see, let's maybe go back to our shadows a bit. I want to add a little bit more of the saturation in my shadows. Okay, and then for blending, I want it to be a little bit more on the split toning side of things. So let's have it have a little bit more harsh separation. And there we go. We just made it warmer. So if we turn off color grading, that's what we had. Color grading. There we go. Beautiful photo. Beautiful image. So that just shows you how you can utilize color grading. So then finally, we'll look at our HSL. Now with the HSL, this definitely is a way that can drastically change the feel of your image. You know, where you can really manipulate specific colors. You can, you know, just change the overall dynamics of your image by changing the HSL. So let's look at this photo. So this one, it looks beautiful. We've already gone through some edits, but we haven't done our color mixer edits yet. So I want to adjust some of my colors here. Now, what I'm going to utilize is one easy way, just because we have so much green here, just be so much easier. I'm going to use the target adjustment selection. And this will allow me to be able to hover over any area that I want to adjust, and the program will see that color, and then I can just simply click and drag wherever I want. And I can do this within any of the options, whether it's my hue, the saturation, or the luminance. So let's select that, and I want to select it for my hue. So let's select hue, and we'll come into this green, and you see that color pop up? You see how it's highlighted there? It knows what colors, you know, it sees the colors there, and so once I select it, it's going to adjust the hue over here for that specific color or colors of what it just may happen to find. So let's select it, and we're just going to drag either way. I just want to show you what it does. So see how there's so much green, and then there's a smidge of yellow that it spots, because we're also adjusting that in the image too. So if we go the other way, you see it just adds a little bit more richness into the green by going a little bit more deeper with our green hue. So very easy way of using the targeted adjustment. So I really like how that looks there. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. So then next, let's add a little bit more saturation. Or maybe let's add luminance. I don't really think we even need to do anything with saturation. That looks beautiful as is. So let's do the same with luminance, and let's add a little brightness to it. Let's add a little brightness with the luminance. That looks beautiful. And then I may want to change maybe this little yellow leaf that's here in the middle. Let's select that. And let's see, do we want to go more red? Do we want to go more yellow? You know, up to you. We'll just have fun. Make a little happy leaf there. Happy leaf. And as you can see, it's changing our orange, our yellow, and our greens in our hue. And that looks beautiful. Looks beautiful, doesn't it? So then let's go to this image here. This is a recent photo and we have a lot of colors here, a lot of colors. So this one, I'm gonna reset and, you know, it looks good with nothing done to it. It looks beautiful, doesn't it? But we want to go all out. This is the last photo that I'm gonna demonstrate for you. And we're going to go all out. Because it's so filled with a bunch of colors, we want to exaggerate them all. Let's have fun. Let's just make everything colorful. So for our reds, we want to go a little bit more red, maybe a little bit more candy apple red. So let's go quite a bit over in our hue. For our orange, let's go a little bit more on the red side too. Let's go crazy with this. This is our last photo. Let's have some fun. For our yellow, we'll go a little bit more warmer. You see how the colors are starting to come in? So for our green, let's go richer in the green. That's like the building windows there. Let's go a little bit more green. Aqua, we'll go more on the green side here too. Our blue, let's go purple. You see in our sky area right now, let's add a little purple because I think that will look pretty good, having a little bit more of a purple tint there. Not too much, not too much, just a little bit. Maybe add a little bit in the magenta as well. And that looks good. That looks good. Okay, we getting somewhere. Let's go to saturation next. Go to saturation. Let's beef up these colors a bit. Let's add some saturation. We're gonna go crazy. Add some orange, add some yellow. Yeah, we're going crazy. Let's add a lot of green. Let's add some aqua. Let's add some blue. See how that came in with the blue channel? You see that? Look at that. Watch what happens. Look at that. Isn't that nice? Isn't that beautiful? Let's go ahead and bump up purple, bump up magenta. Beautiful. And then finally, let's bump up in the luminance. Let's bump up luminance. So let's add some emphasis in that red. Let's do so in the orange. Let's bring it up in the yellow. Let's bring it up in the green. So as you can see, you see a little bit of that green down in those windows there. You see it? Yeah, let's bring up the green. Now aqua, also the windows. Watch this. Look at that. See, we're bringing that up. We're brightening it up a bit. Now for some colors, you might not want to do that. So let's maybe bring down our purple. Let's bring down purple a little bit. Let's bring down magentas a bit. Boom, there we go. Isn't that beautiful? Look at it without any color adjustments. Now look at it. Look how rich we made that photo. That beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Well, unfortunately, we've come to the end of this session. I hope that I showed you a lot of new tools, a lot of new features, and just basically showed you a lot of new ways on how you can really make the most out of your images. And you can really do a lot with so many of these tools in Lightroom to really bring forth more dynamic colors in your photos. I just love colors. You can see even from the images around me, the vibrancy, the richness in the colors. I love them. So I would love for you to try a lot of these features out for yourself. They're amazing. Lightroom is a very powerful tool and you can just push your images even further. So I hope you enjoyed this session. I hate to see you go, but unfortunately, this is the end. Now, if you want to learn more about me, you can do so. You can visit me online at professorhines.com, where you can learn about the workshops and classes that I offer. You can even watch my tutorials and behind the scenes videos on YouTube at Professor Hines Choice. And if you may happen to have questions after the end of this session, or you just simply want to show me later on that you've utilized some of the tools that I've shown you in this session, by all means, share them with me. Tag me in your images or send me a message on Instagram. You can find me on Instagram at Professor Hines. I hope you really enjoyed this, and I hope you enjoyed the rest of the conference with all of the great, amazing speakers we have this year. Until next time, I will see you later. Thank you for joining me.